Hey, welcome to the November bottom episode of Top to Bottom Male Romance Podcast, where we celebrate all things male romance. I am Jessica.
And I'm Marky.
So this is where we're going to talk about our bottom books for the month. We chose The Sumage Solution and Romancing the Werewolf, both from GL Carriger, who we had on our top episode for the month, who was amazing. This episode, we're going to have an interview with Kirt Graves, who did the narration for The Sumage Solution. So that was really awesome, and we'll get to that here towards the bottom of the episode.
It was awesome having Kirt on the show. We got to talk about voice acting, podcast, passion projects, and all kinds of fun things. So thanks, Kirt, for joining us. It was a lot of fun.
So before we jump into that, there are a few things we want to talk about.
Yeah, there's a couple things. There's only really one thing that's happening right now that's kind of bleeding into December that I wanted to bring up. The Rainbow Awards is happening right now, which is an audience participation thing. You can go and vote on the picks for this. The Rainbow Awards is an annual contest celebrating outstanding work in LGBT fiction and nonfiction, hosted and owned by blogger Eliza Roll, damn it. You corrected me before we started, and then I did it again. Anyway, the contest is open to all authors of work containing LGBT fiction characters and work chronicling the true stories of LGBT persons. And that happens on December 8th. But like I said, I think the voting's still going on, so you can go and cast your vote for some amazing authors.
So another thing kind of going on in our world is Audible just announced a romance package that you can get where you get unlimited romance books. It's a $7 thing on top of your normal Audible subscription, but it's unlimited.
Right, and they do have a whole LGBTQ section with an actual impressive amount of male romance audiobooks. There's a couple that I saw from Abigail Rue. I want to say the first 4 of the cut and run books are on there. Josh Layton has a couple. Ella Frank, I know, has a couple. I don't know if all of them are on there, but I saw at least 2 or 3. So I was pretty impressed because this is still pretty new, and a lot of authors haven't jumped on board yet because apparently they're really ambiguous about how they're going to roll out payments for it. So they're not sure if it's going to be kind of like how the Kindle Unlimited is, where you have to finish the book to get the credit, or how it's going to be structured, so it's a little weird. What's out there right now is not bad, so I would say if you haven't had a chance to binge on some really good audiobooks from some of the more established authors that already have a ton of audiobooks out, for $7 you could probably devour a ton of them depending on what your time scales are like. The other thing, this month on the 15th, Fence, the comic by C.S. Picot and Joanna the Mad came out, and I went and snagged the first issue. It's really good. The art style for it is really clean, kind of Eastern inspired, but still very Western feel, and very much uniquely Joanna style. It's about 2 college-age boys who have this amazing rivalry that gets struck up in the first issue, and of course it's about fencing. And it's really interesting because I know zero about fencing, so not only is it really interesting as far as the character development, but I actually am learning about how fencing works, so it's pretty interesting, but I'm looking forward to it. It looks like it's going to lend itself to some pretty sexy rivalry.
And you said the second issue is out next month?
Yeah, December 20th is when it comes out, so. And there is digital options, so you don't have to go get the physical copies of them. You can get them on Kindle for the same price, $4.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's also NaNoWriMo, which for those who don't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, where basically it's a huge community of people online that commit to writing a book in 1 month. I've tried many times and failed every time. I am awful at committing to word count because I get lost in world building. Well,
and it's tough too because this is going to air towards the end of the month, obviously. So this is, if you haven't started, if you can bang out 50,000 words in a week, it's either just going to be complete gibberish, and that's fantastic, or you're some type of genius, I don't know. But I think roughly it's 1,600 words a day to be able to hit the 50,000 word mark. So that's pretty rough. That's no small undertaking to try to hit that type of word count in a month. I've only been able to do it twice, but it was in my younger days where I didn't have a full-time job, so I could literally just kind of barf it out over the entire day instead of trying to cram in word count at 8 o'clock in the morning before I go to work. It's fun. I'm interested to know if anybody out in the ether who maybe listen to our podcast has done nano, is doing nano. How's your novel going? What are you writing about? I'd love to hear about it. So if you are or have finished or anything, you should let us know. We'd love to hear about it.
I think we should start talking about our bottoms.
Yay, bottoms!
So again, we had 2 book picks this month, 2.5 really. We did the Sumage Solution with the recommendation to do the prequel for it, Marine Biology.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also did Romancing the Werewolf. So let's talk about the Sumage Solution.
Okay, so the Sumage Solution is about basically a romance that gets struck up between a mage who can't mage and a werewolf. The characters being Max, who's the Sumage, or the... How would you describe a Sumage?
They're basically a mage that doesn't have... To me, it seems like they don't have the outward casting powers, but they have, like, the ability to displace magic in different ways. There seems to be different versions of each kind where they displace different kinds of magic or in different ways. So there's surges and stuff that are like the regular mages, civic mages as they're called, and then Sumages who don't.
Yeah, so, and from what I gathered from reading the book, like, Max, who's the mage, he kind of is like the rubber stopper that stops electricity. Like, he's the grounding element for it. So he's like a weird sponge almost, because he talks about in the beginning of the book how when it happens it always hurts. Like, it's like getting absorbing this arcane blast of ridiculous, and his whole body absorbs it, and it's like apparently really painful and terrible, but he always just like, meh, this is how what I am, so this is how it works.
And he's also a very delightful smartass.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why he's my absolute favorite, is because his snark is just off the charts. You can't help but not fall in love with Max. I highlighted some of my favorite quotes from the book, and I will give zero context because it's funnier that way. Let's see. Spicy dick, he thought, mildly hysterical. And then later on during one of the sexy times, if Spicy Dick didn't give it away. Really, Max? Fizzy jizz? I see werewolves have a heightened sense of taste. It's a mage thing. The champagne of cocks.
Yeah, so I only had one highlight, and it's not funny. But it's good writing. It says, you're not writing your own story. You're living with the disappointment of failing someone else's outline. Which, as somebody who is awful at writing, that spoke to me. It was just a good line. I liked it.
Well, I think it's a good motto for life, too. Like, it should be on one of those inspirational posters that you have in your office that, like, you wake up and see, and you're like, yeah, damn right.
Aside from Max, who would you say is some of your favorite characters?
I mean, we talked about Kirt, or we talked to Kirt about Manifest Destiny.
Yes, I love her.
Which is really hard to top, honestly. Manifest Destiny is a multiple 100-year-old cross-dressing Katsune with the sass that rivals Max's to the core. Like, it's the back and forth between them is so good.
Yeah, definitely. Manifest Destiny is definitely one of my favorites. I also loved Gladdy, the other Kitsune.
Oh,
the Kitsune are great.
Yeah.
Really nice splash of flavor into it. It was super fun.
Mm-hmm.
So some of what I really liked about it was, on top of the smart and fun writing that I'm used to from GL Carriger, because I absolutely adore her and will never stop saying that, is something we haven't gotten from any of her previous books, and that was incredibly spicy sex scenes.
Yeah.
And spicy really kind of fits the tone there, but they're very graphic.
Yeah.
And that is from somebody who wrote these Victorian novels of like politeness and tea and dandies and stuff, going into something pretty, we're just gonna keep going with sexy, because it was blush worthy.
I had forgotten how good they were, because the Sumage Solution originally came out in July of this year, so it had been months and months since I had read this story, and I remember when we first read it being like, holy shit, is this Gale? Because this is, like, these sex scenes are graphic in the best ways. Like, it's not graphic to where you're going to recoil away, and we can have a whole discussion about, like, what's too graphic in romance books, but they're very sizzling and fantastic. She does a really good job as far as, like, hitting all senses when she writes her sex scenes, which is really important. Like, you really get wrapped up in the scene. But I forgot where I was going with this, because now I'm just thinking about sexy stuff.
It's a hazard of the job.
Yes. But no, I was very impressed. It's really well done, and like you had mentioned, her other work is a comedy of manners, is how she had phrased it.
Yeah.
So it's very polite when they talk about their sexy times, and it's like that in romancing too, which we'll talk about. It's implied what happens, but it's very sweet and very just polite is the only thing I could really think of, because it gets the point across, but they're not talking about, like, you know,
it's
fizzy jizz and spicy cocks.
Right, yes. That is definitely missing from Romancing the Werewolves, but I wouldn't say missing from it. It was
no, it's different. It wouldn't fit in Romancing the Werewolves. Like, if
I think Lyle would not be having any of those things talked about in public.
No, I don't even think he would appreciate that word being thrown around in private. Like, he'd just be like, excuse me.
He is quite proper.
Yes, it would be thrown off. And I appreciate and respect the fact that she can have those totally different writing styles and it still be two different stories that you can appreciate completely outside of each other.
Right. So for Romancing the Werewolf, this one, we mentioned in the top episode how this is part of a larger series, sort of. It's an offshoot involving two characters that were in the Parasol Protectorate series. So they had a moment where they came together in one of the last books, or the last book of the series. Everybody, all of her fans have been clamoring for, when are we going to get a Biffy and Lyle story? And so this one takes place 20 years. They separated because they had to go their separate ways for various reasons. And
shit was going down, as you said.
Shit was going down. Lyle had to leave. Biffy had to train to be the new alpha of the London pack, and this is after a lifetime of trying to become a vampire, and then everything goes haywire and he becomes a werewolf instead. And so this is the story of them coming back together, which I just absolutely loved it. It was really sweet, really funny.
Overwhelmingly funny. Like, this novella was, like, all of her work is funny. Like, and she had talked about that in the interview, too, that humor is really important. And there's tons of humor in Sumage Solution, too. But the type of humor that she can portray in her Parasol Protectorate series it's just so British and so proper and just so, I don't know, it's charming. So even when they came together and it's this sweet, reuniting of two souls that have been separated for 20 years, like it's still so, like, the surrounding ridiculousness around what's happening is so funny. So,
and another fun point is that it takes place during Christmas. So if you haven't read it yet, you still should, because it's got Christmassy overtones if you kind of want a seasonal feel to your smut these days. But it's super cute. I wanted to talk about how, because this is part of a bigger universe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you tend to want to, or do you reread the prior books in a series before you jump into a new one that's coming out?
I think it really depends on how long it's been since the last book came out. So if it's something like with this genre, most authors are pretty good about pumping these books out pretty quick. And we had discussed this in our first episode too. And that's one of the reasons why male romance is so awesome, is that most writers are able to, their books are maybe a couple months apart. So with those, it's not so bad. But pulling something that's not male romance with Song of Ice and Fire, it's been 6 years since the last book came out. I don't remember what the hell was going on. Like, I have no idea. So I would have to go back and read that. But yeah, with these, it probably wouldn't be too bad. But like when Jex's new book comes out, I'll probably reread those. Yeah. But that's more just an excuse to reread them because I love them.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do that anyways.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think I usually kind of wish I could reread. Mm-hmm. I just, it's hard for me to make the time to do it, mostly because there's just too many things I haven't read that I'm trying to catch up on. So stopping to reread something I've already read is almost guilty pleasure-ish. So I always want to, but I never do. I can't remember the last time I did. And I was worried about it going into Romancing the Werewolf, feeling like, am I going to still know these characters? Am I going to feel like I know what's going on? But it was very much like coming home to old friends. I fell right back in line with them. It felt like I was revisiting a home that I hadn't been to in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then there's like when you read a whole bunch of a series all at once, like if it's all already out. Yeah. So again, not male romance, but like with the Kate Daniels series by Alona Andrews, I read all of those books like back when there was just like 10 of them, like all within like the period of a month. And I kept getting really frustrated because I'm like, I know what she looks like, I know where she works, I know how they got together, I know all of this. Why are you telling me this? Oh, right, these books came out a year apart, not 2 hours apart, like I just did. So
yeah, I did that with Sloane Kennedy's Protector series. I had discovered that series when she was already 9 books in, and read those all in like, I don't know, 2 days or something stupid. So it was the same kind of thing where somebody would be introducing a character I had just finished a book about, and they're like, this is so-and-so, he's, with this person, or he just got married to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know, I was there. I could tell you all about how they met. Want to hear about it?
It's really interesting how many different people kind of approach series a different way. So you guys should let us know how you approach if you have to reconsume the series before you go into the next one, or what your habits are with that.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear what the general consensus is to that. Like, if it's one of those things where a new book comes out, you're like, well, I guess I just have to read them all again, shrug. Or if you're like, no, I'm good. Yeah.
So I do want to announce that we did have a winner for our giveaway.
We did.
Lindsay M., who's a subscriber to our website, won a copy of the Sumage Solution. So congratulations, Lindsay. We're excited for you. Any giveaways we do in the future are going to be done that same way. So if you have not subscribed to our website, you should do that. We will have a link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
And so I guess now we should move into our interview with Kirt. Kirt was super sweet. He was incredibly flattering about our very noobish podcast skills. So thank you so much for that, Kirt. And it was super fun to talk to him. We had some audio issues on our end that we were not able to get completely out, so apologies for that. We are working on better equipment.
Yeah.
Kirt's equipment's great. He sounds beautiful. So yeah, those professional voice actors. So without further ado, our interview with Kirt Graves. Well, joining us today is Kirt Graves. He is the narrator of our book pick for the month, The Sumage Solution, which is actually, I'm talking to you for a second here, it's kind of weird because now I feel like I'm hearing Max, and it's because I've been re-listening to it, and it's like that's what I've been listening to in my car, and it's a little surreal. But you are an administrative assistant, speech coach, and podcast enthusiast, stage actor, and vocal performer. You have quite a docket.
Yeah, I like to keep myself busy.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do.
So we see that you've done, aside from doing the Sumage Solution, you've done several other books in our genre. Palisade by Rosalind Abel, Whiskey Business by Yvonne Gell, Wolf Song, which is one of my favorites, by TJ Klune. What got you into voice acting? How did you start this?
Well, as I was talking to you guys about before we started the official interview, I have a podcast of my own. And so I had been interested in just kind of the medium of like audio entertainment. And I've always loved audiobooks, and I've always loved podcasts since they became a thing. I loved talk radio before podcasts were a thing. And so I was chugging away as a podcaster, and a friend of mine who lives in town with me and I do some theater with had mentioned that she had started narrating audiobooks. And I have enough of an ego that I was like, well, I can do that. If you can do that, I can do that. And so I just started auditioning for audiobooks. And she kind of gave me the ins and outs of how to start and how to set up an account and how to start seeking work in the industry. And so I went for it. And then I got lucky, and I auditioned for about 4 months. I was working a job that is not my current job, where I was just really, really unhappy with what I was doing. And it had reached a point where I was talking with my then fiance, my now husband, about just how hard it was to like get out of bed and go to work every day when you don't love what you do and you just feel like the environment's really toxic. And we had finally decided it was time for me to quit that job, not really knowing what was going to come up next for me. And I went upstairs to our office and I wrote my resignation letter, and I pressed print and I closed that window, and there was my offer to narrate Wolf Song, my first ever audiobook. I mean, the timing was literally that perfect. And it just kind of felt like this little nudge from the universe saying, yeah, this is something you should pursue. And little did I know at that time, I was a novice. I didn't know what I was doing. And that turned out to be a really good thing when tackling your first audiobook. There was a whole lot of things I didn't know, and that helped me to be naively confident. But I had no idea the scope that TJ Klune had and how popular he was and the audience that he had. If I had known, I think I would have been terrified because his fans are so loyal and really wonderful and supportive. And I don't want to make them out, to be scary in any real way. But like, I would have been really nervous about doing that piece of work if I had understood the niche it had already carved out in the male romance community. And so I got lucky. I think I did an okay job on that book. There's lots of things I would change listening to it, but it got a really nice reception. And that was kind of the launching point for doing other books in this genre. And most of the books I've done have been in the male romance genre. I am a gay man, and so I had no qualms about taking on those stories. And it's a popular and growing genre, so hell yeah, I want to do more.
That's awesome.
I am doing more. I'm excited by it.
So I take it, since you were excited to do this genre, do you read a lot of male romance? Is it something that you read in your off time, like for fun, or is it something that you got into when you got into voice acting?
It's actually not something I had ever read before. I am a Well, as you mentioned, I'm a forensics coach, a speech coach, and I'm also really involved in my local theater. So my reading time for fun is usually research. I read a lot of plays, I read a lot of short stories, poetry collections, because I'm usually trying to find a piece for my students or a play for the theater. When I very rarely have a chance to actually just read something for pleasure, I like murder mysteries, and I like a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. What attracted me initially to Wolfsong was the fantasy element of the story, and then it happened to be about a gay romance, and I was like, oh, cool, that's great.
That wasn't even, you didn't even know going into it that it was a gay romance?
The description was very clear that it would be about two boys falling in love, so that, like, I knew going into the audition that it was. But that wasn't the part of it that attracted me to the story initially, but it is something that I have grown to really appreciate the more I read for doing this kind of work. And as a result, I've read other of TJ's books. I've read the other authors that I've worked with. I've read some of their work just to familiarize myself a little bit more with the genre. And it turns out I really enjoy it. It's nice to see some representation of that lifestyle in literature, which, I mean, I definitely did not have growing up.
You've mentioned your podcast a couple times, and I saw on your website you talk about the Forensic Faces. Can you, that it's one of your passion projects, can you tell us a little bit about it? Like what it is?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sure. Well, I was a forensicator, as we call them here, which is high school speech and debate, is what a lot of people know it as across the country. In the Midwest and in other parts of the country, we call it forensics. So in high school, I did that. It was the thing that gave me my community, my confidence, my voice. I loved doing it so much that I came back after high school and coached and judged as a volunteer. And then a few years ago, I became a coach of the high school that I actually went to when I was growing up. And in the course of that process, I just started realizing that there was this whole community of people who I just loved talking to, and their career is teaching people how to talk. And I was like, well, what better source of material for a podcast? So I started doing some interviews for that. It evolved into a weekly chat with one of my fellow coaches, Melissa Gabrielson, during the regular forensics season here in Wisconsin. So we kind of do a recap of each tournament, and we just tackle, topics that we think are important to the high schoolers and the coaches who listen to us. And I'm glad you called it a passion project, because that's definitely what it is. And I'm sure that's what this is for you guys too. So you get what I'm talking about, which is like, I just needed some way to express my love for that activity in a way that was visceral and that I could put out into the world and that I could start a conversation about and talk to more people. And it's done that. I am so grateful that we've done this project. I'm so grateful that I brought Melissa on board to have a conversation as a part of the podcast, because it's let people get to know me. And that has allowed them to approach me outside of the podcast, where normally I don't think they would. I don't know that they would reach out, and they do. And so I hope that's the result for you guys too, because I think that's really the joy of podcasting, is that it gives you a relationship with people that you haven't yet met, but you will someday.
Yeah, we've been pretty overwhelmed by the response we've gotten. Everybody's been really super awesome about telling us what they like and telling us that it's like sitting around with your friends and talking, and that's exactly what we wanted to go for. So yeah.
And talk about a great community. I mean, I wanted to highlight the community of speech coaches and students, and you're highlighting another community that I've really grown to appreciate and love in the last, it's been a little over a year since Wolfsong came out. I mean, the fans of this genre are so warm and kind. And I listened to the episode where you went to GRL and you had the same experience. And I was just so happy to hear that. I think the writers, I think the readers, the people who work at the publishing houses, they've all been super supportive and nice. And I mean, without fail, it has been a positive experience since I started doing this crazy little experiment where I thought I could narrate audiobooks.
It's definitely I wasn't expecting the level of camaraderie so fast with the fans of this genre. We dipped our toe in it and it was cool. And most book people are pretty nice anyway. But this group in particular is just as soon as you enter one group, you've made 80 friends. Yeah. Everyone's just so nice all the time. It's so fun. And
active, and it's promotional maybe isn't the right word because it sounds a little cynical, but they are. They don't just want to enjoy it, they want to advocate for it. They want to spread the word.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that.
So many people other authors and other fans will promote everybody's new release all the time. I haven't had one day being in any of those groups or following any other authors who aren't like, oh, congratulations to so-and-so for their new release. Everybody go read their book. Like, it's just, it's so warm all the time.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing, too, because, like, you know, I still go on to audition for people's work, and how quickly I started to recognize names, not because I had read them, but because, like, they just get shout-outs all the time. It's like, oh, how do I know that author's name? And then, well, it's because this person right over here just said, oh, I loved this book that you did, and also this other book. And they try to help each other find the things that they will love. It's just all about enjoyment and community.
Mm-hmm.
So steering it back a bit to our book for the month, which is the Sumage Solution that you narrated. There's a lot of characters in that book, and you do a pretty good job of making them all sound unique and be their own entities. How do you get in the headspace of the characters? How do you prepare for that kind of endeavor?
Oh, well, you know, again, I think this is one of those things where I benefited from two things. One, being naive. I benefited from inexperience where I didn't worry about it maybe as much as I should have. But the other thing is my forensics background. So anybody who hasn't done or seen high school speech in forensics, there are acting categories, which I did and which I coach, in which you are expected to tell a story and you can be playing 1 or 30 characters. So distinct, you know, posture, facial, and vocal representation is a part of that activity. So it's something I'd been practicing for over 15 years, never thinking that I would use it in this capacity, but it is something I was doing nonetheless. And then the opportunity to start narrating audiobooks came around, and that tool was in my toolbox, at least for what I was used to using it for. So when I'm recording, I do a lot of changes, not only to voice, but also posture. You know, it's interesting that you said, you know, how do you get into the headspace? Because that really is the most important thing, which is just to kind of figure out who the person is. And I tend to just read that person's dialogue a few times until I feel like I found the person. And then once I feel like I know them, I can pretty easily jump back into that person when they come back to the story. My process is, I guess, still not really a process so much as it is just trial and error. So far, it's worked out. And the other nice thing, especially about Sumage Solution, is like this was the first time that a producer had actually reached out to me to do a book. And with it came this like lovely breakdown of who all the characters were and what they were like. I'm assuming this came from Gail with just like a little bit of insight into who each person was. So that like launched the process even more because I start with a character description, then I read the book and I get everything that the characters are from the text. Especially the main characters. Like there's so much in the text. I've been so lucky to do books that are of a quality that like I really feel like I get to know the people. And it's not so much like I have to make a choice for who they are, that the author has just made it clear who that person is, and I just have to do my best to imitate that person. With Sumage Solution, there were some difficult parts because, especially like the biker gang, like there's so many of them. And like most of them are from Boston. Most of them are like big, beefy guys. And so, you know, when every character description is like the husky voice and the Boston accent, I'm like, how am I going to make all these husky Boston guys sound different? So that's when you really just try to focus on like, what is their attitude like? And not so much that their voice would sound different, but like how they would say something might be different. And you hope you find it.
I think that came across really well because, like, with Colin, he kind of had a bit more of a meekness to him, and Kevin sounded Tank sounded so soft-spoken, and they had their nuances. I mean, it was clear who you were hearing.
Good.
You did well.
Thank you. And I'm glad. I'm happy to hear that because, I mean, at the end of the day, you just want to make sure you're doing the work justice. You never, really, I feel like my job is to not be noticed as much as possible. That if you're noticing something the narrator just did, most of the time that's a bad thing. Because you shouldn't be focusing on something the narrator just did. You should be focusing on the really cool choice the author just made or like the amazing thing the character just said.
I would say even more impressive than separating the werewolves is the dialogue going between Manifest Destiny and Max with all of that sass going back and forth.
Oh. Let me tell you, when I found out that there was a drag queen in this book, I just about flipped my lid. I love drag queens. I love RuPaul. I love Drag Race. I love going to drag shows. The opportunity to put on that skin, metaphorically, was so exciting to me. And I was so jazzed to get to because, I mean, she doesn't come in until like well over halfway through the book.
Oh, yeah, she's
and
like at the end.
Yeah, I was like, and so when she finally makes an appearance, I was like, thank you. I love this person. And like, I remember too, like when obviously you read the book. Well, I mean, not everybody does, but I have to read the book before I start narrating, just so that I get a full understanding of the arc of the story from beginning to end. And so I had this character description of Mana on my paper, and like I'm reading the book and I'm not getting Mana, and I was like, well, maybe this is somebody who's like she's planning on really more introducing in the future, and we just get the idea of her from the phone calls. And then she shows up, and I'm in my bed reading, and I'm like giggling to myself because I'm like, yes, this is gonna be so good, so lit, as my students would say.
As the hip kids are saying these days.
One of the benefits of doing what I do is finding out what the kids are saying these days. So, and appropriating it in a way that makes them cringe.
Yes, that is the best part.
Exactly. So yeah, I loved Mana, and I loved that exchange. I loved that. Yeah, when she showed up, I was like, this is great. More of her. Yeah. Anytime. Give that queen her own book. I want it.
Oh, we would have to read it. That would be absolutely the pick, because that's one of the best characters, and that was going to be one of our questions, is if you had a favorite character, but I think you just answered
it's it. Mana. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely it is. I mean, I loved Max and Biff, but favorite would be Mana.
Gail's really good about doing that. She has the best side characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's unreal. I don't know if you've read much of her other work, but all of her side characters are always so rich and super fun to read, and we all want more stories of them. And the beautiful thing about Gail is right now she is working on a whole bunch of different novellas, so we will get a lot of her side characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was excited to hear that when I listened to the podcast she was on. And I mean, I did. I loved the side characters. I mean, Trickle and Kevin were two of my other favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I loved those people. They didn't excite me as a narrator as much as Mana, but I loved the characters themselves. I was happy they were there in the book. I mean, I guess as a reader, not even as a narrator, I just appreciated their presence and the variety that they bring to this cast of characters. I was really impressed. I hadn't actually read anything else by Gail. As I said, I'm kind of new to the genre. I was a newbie, a novice, and I haven't gotten to do a ton of reading for pleasure up until now. And I got so lucky with TJ. And then because of that, I think I just had a bar set so high that when it came time to work with other authors, it was just kind of like, some offers came in that were like, I don't think I can do that. And when the story from Gail came in, I was like, excellent. Like, this is the quality. This is the type of author that if I can work for and do a good job and maybe even get lucky enough to create a long-term relationship with, like, that's the type of work that I want to do.
Yeah, Gail she's really big on audio, so she's always very particular about her voice actors. So I would assume, I don't know, I enjoyed how you read Sumage Solution. I think that it was really well done.
Thank you.
So hopefully we'll have you back for the next one, because I know that I think she's supposed to be working on it. Hopefully. No pressure, Gail, if you listen to
that. Yeah, I would love that. I hope she was pleased with it as well.
Aside from the Manifest Destiny stuff, because we obviously know that's your favorite character and your favorite part, were there any other parts of the book that really stood out to you as favorites?
I'm a big fan of world building in general. I was a huge mythology buff when I was younger. I just enjoyed reading that kind of story. And so I do love any book, any story that creates its own world. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, that was one of the things that attracted me to the story, was the world building. I mean, this is an embarrassing story to tell, but I'll share it with you guys. We're close now. So I am that guy who went to see Twilight in the movie theater, with friends, because we thought it would be funny. But then I went and read all the books purely because the vampires didn't die in the sunlight, but they glittered. I was like, world building, I'm in. So I went and read the books. I regret that now, but I did it. I did it because Stephanie Meyer was creating a new mythology, and I was attracted to that. And it's what I loved about Wolfsong. It's what I loved about the Sumage Solution, is you would think with the basic building blocks of werewolf, magic person, you're going to run out of ways to make that interesting. But really good storytellers like Gail and TJ have written two completely different stories with their own mythologies and their own world. And I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know the world that they created with their words. I think it's magical what authors do when they build that other reality.
And especially, too, with vampires and werewolves and things like that, it can be such an overplayed genre that when you get to read a story that is different, when they bend the normal mythos to a different degree or add different elements to it to make it refreshing, it's always really easy to fall in love with, because how can you not like vampires and werewolves and things like that? So I always love when they're able to put like a more science spin on it or something completely different, like with Gale and her tethers and things like that. It's just so cool and unique.
With Ravensong coming out soon, are you slated to do that, or is there anything you can announce, any other audiobooks that are coming out that you can talk about?
Yeah, the plan is to do Ravensong, and TJ confirmed that at GRL. They did a Facebook Live thing.
That's right. We missed that, and we were so sad because like I wasn't there for that part of GRL, and I know that they did a reading and all this other cool stuff. I guess we missed that announcement, so that's exciting.
Yeah, well, they did. I know they did like the narrator panel on Wednesday night, and then TJ and Derek McLean and Michael Leslie did just like a Facebook Live question and answer thing. It looked like just like in the lobby of the conference center or hotel. And so I'm on my honeymoon because like I had gotten married the weekend of GRL. And thank you. And so I was like, oh, they did a Facebook Live thing. I am still very much of the mind that I am a student of this industry and of this genre. So I was like, I should probably watch this and see what they talk about and what questions are asked of Michael and Derek and what answers Michael and Derek give, because I'm sure I can learn something from them. And then the coolest thing happened, which somebody asked about Ravensong, and TJ was like, oh yeah, Kurt's going to do it. And I was like, whew, okay, good. That book did so well and did so much for TJ, and people love it so much. I would not at all blame him if he was like, you know what, I really got to give this to somebody with a little more experience. But he seems to be happy to continue to work with me on that series in particular. And I could not be more thrilled. I love that world. I cannot wait to go back to those people. He has promised that we will all hate him at the end of this book. And I can't wait to find out why. Yeah, he messaged me a few days ago with the cover art, which I cannot and will not reveal. But it's real. It's a thing that's happening, and I'm excited to see what he does and to go back to those people and that world, because I really loved it. Like I said, I lucked out when he said yes to working with me, when he probably in his right mind should not have.
I think you sell yourself short. Like the audiobook is very fantastic.
Well, good. I'm glad. There's so much that I've learned about the production side that I'm really excited to bring to Ravensong. Not only with like the equipment that I've been able to now get taking this more seriously, but also just the workflow. It's going to go so much faster, and I'm really excited about that. There were a lot of like staying up until 4 a.m. editing Wolfsong because like I just didn't know what I was doing, and even though I didn't know TJ and I didn't know his fans, like the quality of the work was good enough that I knew I had to do it justice. Yeah. And I put in a lot of time and energy to get that done in a pretty short period of time, because it was also a contract where I had to get it done in 60 days. And it's a 20-hour book.
Wow.
And, it takes a while. They say on average it takes about 6 hours of work to get one finished hour of audio. It was pretty much my full-time job for a month getting that one out.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. I mean, we are babies with sound editing and all this stuff, and it takes us a good hot minute to just put together a podcast episode. So
yeah.
I can't imagine putting together an audiobook.
Oh, yeah. I remember spending hours on my first episodes of the podcast. And, you just do it until you know how to do it better. And that's really the way to go. And I think it's a really great thing to know how to do it yourself. It's such a good skill to have. Yeah, keep going, because it's worth it. It's a labor of love, and you will continue to love it if you're anything like me.
Yeah, every episode we love it a little bit more. So this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And as far as other things to talk about that I'm doing, I'm working right now on the Lavender Shores series for Rosalind Abel, a.k.a. Brandon Witt.
Nice.
So that it's a 5-book series. All 5 books are out now. Because of that silly wedding, I got way behind on keeping up with his writing. I had this crazy notion that like while also planning a wedding, I would be able to record an audiobook. That was my bad. If anybody is out there listening thinking that that's a thing you can do, you can't. Not without maybe sacrificing the actual marriage part, which was the part I was excited about. So I still have those that I'm working on. There will be at least the first 5. He has hinted at the possibility of doing more, and I think they're being really well received. So I think he might end up doing more in that series, and I'm really enjoying that. On my honeymoon, I actually went to the part of California that his fictional town of Lavender Shores is set in.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I talk about, kismet and meant to be, just like Wolfsong popping up at exactly the right moment. This series came, and I was like, that's where we're going on our honeymoon. I'll be able to, actually be there. So I love that. And then I'm going to be working, the contracts just came in today for 2 books from Avon Gale and Piper Vaughn. Permanent Ink and Off the Ice.
Nice.
So those will both be coming out, if not before the end of this year. At least one of them should come out by the end of this year, and the other one then in early 2018.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've got a pretty full docket, so that's fantastic.
It's really exciting to kind of be in this position now where I was like, oh, I have a plan for the next few months. So, in addition to the job and the coaching and the theater, but it's this is what I love to do. I have found such a love for this work and for this community. The dream would be to get back to doing it full time. First step to doing that is being crazy busy part-time. And I'm really excited to have that opportunity and grateful for everybody who is listening and buying the audiobooks and rating it and leaving reviews. That means, it not only means so much personally, but I know it's an indicator for people who then might give more work to audiobook narrators and producers. So know that if you're listening, leaving that review, leaving your feedback is so helpful, and it's just great for the people who are doing this work and are trying very hard to give you content that you can be excited about.
Very cool. So if anybody wants to follow you or your work, what's the best way that they can do so?
Sure. You can go to KirtReads.com. Kirt is Kirt. My mom's maiden name. I hated it as a kid, but now I love it because nobody else spells Kirt that way, or very few people do. So KirtReads.com. And then social media, I'm on Facebook, Kirt Graves, Twitter, Kirt Graves, Instagram, Kirt Reads.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much for coming onto our show and letting us talk at you for a little while.
It was really my pleasure. Thanks so much for doing this, guys, and I hope you have a blast.
We were having a great time. Thank you so much.
So thanks again to Kirt Graves. It was really awesome having you on the podcast, and you were super sweet and super awesome, and we really appreciate your support being on.
And the other note that we wanted to bring up, going back to our weird audio issues, fun fact, started a Patreon. So if you guys like what we do and want to support us, we have tiers starting at $1. If you are entertained enough to toss $1 our way, we would definitely appreciate it. There's higher tiers depending on what you're able to donate. It'd be great that each of them come with different perks that are fun, and we'll definitely link it in our show notes. So if you're not able to donate monetarily, we still love you. If you want to support us and can't toss us $1 or whatever, you can share the podcast with your friends, give us good reviews on the medium of your choice. That definitely helps out too. And listening also helps, and we appreciate every single one of you very, very much.
Also, if you buy any of the mail books that we post on our website through the Amazon links that we post, we also get a little bit of that without taking anything away from the authors. So we love you.
Yes. So again, if you're able to, great. If not, still love you.
Yes.
So.
And anything we do get from that is going to go completely back into the show. We're going to improve our equipment, maybe opt for some cool giveaway stuff, things like that. So it's everything that we get and we're going to put right back out.
Right. Because right now we're paying for all of this out of our pockets. So.
And it's fine. We love you. And it's super fun.
It's cool. We're not going broke.
So
but
if we never get a penny, we're going to keep doing it. But, we might sound better if we got a penny or so.
Yeah, if you can.
So we're going to stop mooching off of you guys. And anything else for this month?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right, well, we will see you guys next week where we have our December top, and we will see you guys then.
Bye!